Hello students, this is Mrs. Crumpton. This is your algebra lesson for section 8.4 Special Products. Your learning target: I can find squares of sums and differences. I can find the product of a sum or a difference. Okay students, this is very similar to what we did in the previous section where we were multiplying binomials. The difference is this is going to have some shortcuts for you. Take a look at this first example problem. Also, take note of your key concept. The square of a plus b is the square of a plus twice the product of a and b plus the square of a and b. Plus the square of b. Now look there in the colored part of this, right here. And I'm going to use that as a guide to show you how to do this. We've got two terms, a and b, and that quantity is squared. Well now, being a special product, you have to take and write this out. Remember, to square something means to multiply something by itself. So you have to write that out as multiplying that binomial by itself. Okay, when you do that, you can use the FOIL method. First times first, outside times outside, inside times inside, and last times last. Or you could use your distributive property, and some of you like the Punnett square method, and you can do that. But this is a shortcut that I'm going to show you. Now what our directions say here is to square the first term. Okay, my first term is 3x. So if I square my first term, 3x times 3x, that gives me 9x to the second power. Okay, now my second part of that says I multiply 2 times the first term times the second term. The first term is 3x, the second term is 5, 3 times 5 is 15x, times 2 would be 30x. And then you square the last, and that's going to be 5 times 5, which would be 25. Okay, students, let me give you a problem and let you try this. Again, this is a shortcut method. You don't necessarily have to use a shortcut, but it will save you some time. Okay, use that shortcut that I just showed you to find the quantity 8c plus 3d, quantity squared. Don't let that second variable throw you off. You square the first term, 2 times the product of the two terms multiplied, and then your last term squared. Okay, let's see how you did on that. So we've got the first term squared, 8c squared. That's going to be 8 times 8, which is 64, c to the second power, plus 2 times 8c times 3d. 8 times 3 is 24, times 2 would be 48. Since we have two variables, make sure you keep the variables c and d. And then last, our special product rule said to square the last term. Excuse me, that should be a 3, not a 2. So we've got 3d squared, which would be 9d squared. Take a look at that. See, let me know how you did on it. If you have questions, be sure you bring those questions to class and ask me. Next, we're going to look at a very similar concept, except this time we're squaring differences. Previously we had sums. This time we have differences. So we've got 3c minus 4 quantity squared. Now you can do this. You can FOIL it. You can use your distributive property. You can use the Punnett square. Remember that to square something means to multiply it by itself. I'm going to use the shortcut that you see right here. Okay, students, this is very similar to the square of a sum. Take a look here at our key concept. And what we're going to do is we're going to square the first term. So we'll have 3c squared. Then multiply times minus or negative 2. The first and second terms. 3c, and we have a negative 4 or minus 4. And then the last term squared. And yes, I know I'm putting a plus sign in there and that says minus, but I'm going to keep that minus or negative sign with the number. So 3c squared would be 9c squared. Then we've got negative 2 times 3 would be negative 6 times 4 would be positive 24. And then last, I square the last term, which would be 16. Somewhere I have made an error on this. Take a look at it and see if you see my error. Here's where my error is. I don't multiply by a negative 2. I actually multiply that negative sign that was with the 4. That's where it is, here. And instead of being a plus, this should be a negative. So my mistake on that. Let me go back and re-talk you through this one. You square the first term. You multiply the two terms together and multiply by 2. Then you square the last term. You can also FOIL these or use your Punnett square just like previously done. Okay, now let me let you try one of these. I want you to find the quantity 6p minus 1 squared. Okay, according to our rule, we're going to square the first term. 6p squared, multiply 6p and 1 together, multiply that times 2, and then square the last term. So my answer here would be 36 p to the second power minus 12p plus 1. Let's do a geometry problem now. Our problem says write an expression that represents the area of a square that has a side length of 3x plus 12 units. Now the first thing I need you to remember is what is the formula for the area of a square. While you're thinking on that, I am going to try and draw a square here. Well, that resembles a square. Now hopefully you remember that the area of a square is found by side square. Squares each side has the same length. So let's take our 3x plus 12 and write it there underneath our square. We're going to take that and plug it into our formula. So we will have 3x plus 12 quantity squared. Now you can work this problem by going back to the square of a sum, which was the first key concept that we looked at. To find our answer, I'm going to square the first term, 3x squared. I'm going to multiply the product of the second two terms by 2, and then I'm going to square the last term. My answer, 9x squared plus 72x plus 144. Now, am I done with this answer? Don't forget that area is in square units. While we haven't been given a unit of measure for this, you can write unit square. That way, if somebody were to come along and need this, that you've come up with this expression, then they would know if, hey, if this is in, if my measure is in inches, my answer would be inches squared. Now the last concept that we're going to look at is probably the easiest shortcut of the previous ones we've looked at. It is the product of a sum and a difference. Notice we've got a sum and a difference here. Basically what this one says is that we're going to square the first one, or multiply the two terms together. 9d times 9d. And then the last term, a positive times a negative, is going to give me a negative. That would be 16. Now if I FOILed this out, or if I use the distributive property, or whichever method that you're using to multiply binomials, you would see that your middle term, or your OI, would add out, because we would have 36d minus 36d. So that middle term would add out. And my answer for this problem, let me change one thing real quick here. We would have 4 squared. Keep the sign of the negative. So we would have 9 times 9 is 81, d to the second power minus 16. Now I'd like for you to try one of these to see how you do. Okay, let's look at this one. We've got 3n. Going to square that 3n. Since we have a positive times a negative, that's going to be a negative 2 squared, and we'll have 9n squared minus 4. Remember, if we were doing FOIL, F-O-I-L method, we would have 9n squared. The outside would be negative 6n. The inside would be plus 6n, and my last would be negative 4. These two terms add out. That's why we can take this shortcut when we have a sum and a difference. Okay, now you're ready for some extra problems for a formative assessment. I would like for you to try on page 488 of your Glencoe Algebra 1 book. I would like for you to try problem number 1, problem number 4, and problem number 6. Then at the top of page 488, I would like for you to try problem number 9 and problem number 10. Your heads-up assignment for this section will come from page 488. You can, if you do well on the formative assessment, you can check all but 2 of these in the back of the book. You can go ahead and start on this heads-up classroom assignment, and we're going to do problems 13 through 45 odd. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in class.